I'm Bran Hole, and I almost died today by sabotage. Someone had loosened the bolts on the watchtower scaffolding. I fell 30 feet onto the cold stone courtyard of Thornwall village. I woke up with bitter medicine burning my throat and my tunic soaked in my own blood. But the wound that should have killed me had already sealed shut. As I sat up, something flickered at the edge of my vision, lines of glowing text that no one else could see. A young lord named Cedric Vane had orchestrated my accident. I'd mocked his family's failed crop yields at the harvest feast, and he'd decided to answer with murder. Now his father, Baron Aldous, was dragging him away by the collar, while my own father, Baron Wulfric, demanded blood price. But I wasn't thinking about politics anymore. I was staring at the fallen scaffolding, and my new system was already calculating how to rebuild it stronger, and how to build weapons no one on this frontier had ever imagined. That was 3 days ago. The scaffolding incident was ruled an accident. No witnesses, no proof, just a second son's word against a baron's heir. My father told me to let it go. I smiled and agreed. Tonight, Baron Merrick's harvest banquet filled the great hall with the stink of roasted boar and noble ambition. I threaded between silk-clad merchants and armored knights, keeping one hand near the glass vial in my pocket, an anonymous gift that had arrived this morning with a note reading for when you need it most. Cedric Vane stood near the wine table, his blonde hair freshly oiled, his laugh too loud. He saw me approaching. His smile curdled. "The bookworm emerges from his tower," he said. "I'm surprised you can walk without scaffolding to support you." I picked up a cup of wine. "I'm surprised you can speak without your father's hand up your back. Though I suppose the puppet strings are less visible at night." His face flushed scarlet. A serving girl bumped his elbow, and red wine splashed across my doublet. Cedric's eyes gleamed with sudden malice. "Oh dear," he said. "The Holt whelp can't even stand near wine without staining himself. Rather like your family's reputation. After that trade route failure." The hall quieted. Nobles turned to watch. I felt the weight of their attention. Second sons didn't usually warrant observation. But public humiliation made for good entertainment. I looked down at the spreading stain. Then I smiled. "At least wine stains wash out, Cedric. Unlike the rot in your family's grain stores. What was it, 40% of the harvest lost to weevils because your father was too cheap to hire a proper granary keeper?" Cedric's hand twitched toward his belt. No weapon there. Nobles didn't carry steel to banquets. But his eyes flicked toward a man standing near the door. Rough hands, a bulge under his servant's tunic. I cataloged the detail and filed it away. Baron Merrick called for the toast. Everyone raised their cups. The crowd pressed closer around the high table where the host stood with his golden goblet. I felt the blade before I saw it. A body slammed into me from behind. Cold steel punched through my doublet, through my ribs, into something vital. The pain came a heartbeat later, white-hot and absolute. I fell. Wine cup shattered. A woman screamed. The assassin's face swam above me. Forgettable features, empty eyes, already melting back into the panicked crowd. The dagger stayed in my side. Blood pooled beneath me on the stone floor. My hand found the vial in my pocket. Glass cracked under my desperate grip. Liquid fire poured through my fingers, soaking into the wound, and my vision exploded into blue light. System initializing. Emergency protocol active analyze function. Unlocked. The pain didn't stop. But it changed, became something I could observe rather than drown in. Lines of blue text appeared around the dagger's hilt, burning information directly into my mind. Material: cursed steel origin, Vane family armory, crest hidden beneath wrapped grip. Coating: slow rot venom. Causes necrosis over 72 hours intent. Death appears natural. After delayed onset, I understood everything in an instant. Not just a murder, a careful murder. The kind that would look like wound fever. The kind no healer could trace back to poison. My fingers wrapped around the hilt. The healing potion was fighting the venom, buying me time I shouldn't have. I pulled. Steel scraped against rib. I screamed. The blade came free, trailing gore, and something black that sizzled when it hit the air. I stood up. The hall had descended into chaos. Guards shoving through crowds. nobles backing away from the spreading bloodstain, Baron Merrick shouting for order. But I only watched Cedric. He stood frozen by the wine table. His face had gone the color of old cheese. He hadn't expected me to get up. I raised the dagger high. Firelight caught the blade, and I used my thumb to peel back the leather wrapping on the grip. The Vane family crest, a serpent coiled around a grain sheath, gleamed silver beneath. "This blade," I said, and my voice carried across the sudden silence, "bears the mark of House Vane. It was coated in slow, rot venom, designed to kill me 3 days." After the wound, every eye in the hall turned to Cedric. I named Cedric Vane as the man who ordered my death. Cedric's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His father, Baron Aldous, materialized at his side, corpulent hands gripping his son's shoulder, pig-like eyes calculating furiously. "This is absurd," Aldous began. "Anyone could have. The crest is yours," Baron Merrick cut in. His voice had gone cold. "I recognized the craftwork. That blade came from your family armory." The blue panels hadn't faded. They hovered at the edges of my vision, waiting. And, as I looked across the assembled nobility, at the shocked faces, the calculating expressions, the hidden fears, something new flickered to life. Assess function. Unlocked numbers appeared above every head. Percentages. And beneath them, single words that burned with terrible clarity. Baron Merrick, 71%. Pragmatic Lady Constance, 23%. Scheming Aldous Vane, 4%. Ruthless Cedric Vane, 2%. Coward. I could see them all. Every ally, every enemy, every noble in this room who would sell me for profit, and everyone who might actually keep their word. The blood was still dripping down my side. The wound was closing too slowly. Guards were converging. My father was pushing through the crowd with murder in his eyes. But I stood absolutely still, watching loyalty percentages shift and dance. As the political implications of my accusation rippled through the hall, and I realized that I had just been given the most dangerous weapon in the entire kingdom. The guards hadn't even finished clearing the blood from the marble floor when Baron Aldous Vane cornered me in the antechamber. "Young Lord Holt." His voice dripped honey over poison. "Surely we can discuss this unfortunate misunderstanding privately." I watched the numbers floating above his head shift. As he spoke, loyalty 4%. The trait beneath it pulsed an angry red. Ruthless. A new percentage had appeared since the Great Hall. Threat assessment, 89%. There's nothing to misunderstand. I pressed my hand against my bandaged side. The wound throbbed with each heartbeat. "Your son stabbed me in the back." Literally. Aldous's pig-like eyes darted to the closed doors. He reached into his coat and produced a velvet pouch that clinked with unmistakable weight. "Gold. At least 50 crowns from the sound of it." "Boys fight," he said smoothly. "Tempers flare at harvest festivals." "Perhaps you provoked my Cedric without realizing." He announced his intention to kill me. I didn't take the pouch. In front of 300 witnesses, the loyalty percentage above his head flickered. 4% became 3%. A new trait was crystallizing beneath. Ruthless, letters forming one by one, calculating. Aldous's smile never wavered. "I'm prepared to be extremely generous, Lord Holt. Your father's holdings border mine. We could discuss arrangements, trade agreements, perhaps even a marriage alliance in time. 50 gold crowns, enough to outfit a small army, enough to buy my commission into any lord's service. I was a second son with no inheritance. This money could change everything." The door slammed open. My father stormed through like a siege engine made flesh. Baron Merrick Holt stood 6 inches taller than Aldous Vane and twice as broad, his gray hair cropped close to a scarred scalp. His loyalty percentage read 71%, with the trait pragmatic burning beneath it. "Get away from my son, you scheming merchant." My father's hand dropped to his sword. "Your boy drew steel at a peace feast. Blood demands blood." Aldous stepped back smoothly. "Baron Merrick, surely, will have satisfaction." My father turned to me, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. "Prime, maybe, or calculation. Bran, name your terms. The Vanes owe us a life. We can take Cedric's head, or we can take their eastern grain routes." Either way, we profit. This was the moment. A noble war would follow if I demanded Cedric's execution. Household would gain territory and respect. But we'd also bleed soldiers we couldn't spare, gold we didn't have, and attention from the capital we couldn't afford. I thought about the percentages dancing through my vision. My father at 71%. Loyal, but pragmatic. He'd support me if my choice made sense. I don't want Cedric's head, I said quietly. Both barons stared at me. What I want, I continued, is his public apology. In the great hall, on his knees, with every noble in attendance, watching him admit that he tried to murder an unarmed man at a peace feast. Aldous' face went gray. You can't. I also want a blood debt formally recorded. House Vano's house Holt one life. Redeemable at my discretion for the next 20 years. I smiled, and it felt like borrowed armor. And I want preferential rates on the Thornwall grain shipments. 40% below standard pricing. For a decade, my father's loyalty percentage ticked upward. 71% became 74%. He understood. You'd rather humiliate my son than kill him? Aldous' voice cracked on the last word. You'd rather have grain discounts than vengeance? I'd rather have a living enemy who owes me everything, I said, than a dead one who's taught me nothing. The negotiations took 3 hours. Aldous fought for every concession. My father backed my play with growing respect, his loyalty climbing to 78% by the time the scribes arrived with fresh parchment. I watched the numbers, learned their patterns. When Aldous' frustration peaked, his loyalty dropped to 2%. When he thought he won a minor point, it climbed to 6%. Useful data, dangerous data, while the scribes prepared the final documents. I found a moment alone in the antechamber. My father's old sword hung on my hip, a family heirloom I'd been permitted to wear for the feast. Nothing special, steel and leather and decades of use. I drew it slowly and focused. Analyze, I thought. Blue light cascaded across the blade. Material, low-carbon iron with trace impurities. Stress fractures along the central fuller. Edge retention, poor. Impact resistance, moderate. Structural weakness, tang insufficiently welded to blade. Risk of catastrophic failure under heavy impact, 34%. Information flooded my mind, not just facts, but understanding. I could see why the blade was weak, how the smith had rushed the folding process, where better materials could reinforce the structure. A new notification pulsed. Blueprint fragment acquired. Basic metallurgical principles, 1/4. My system grew stronger through victory. Not through violence, through cunning. Through turning enemies into debtors and weapons into lessons. I sheathed the sword. As the chamber doors opened, Cedric Vane knelt in the center of the great hall. 300 nobles watched in absolute silence. As he spoke the words I prepared, his loyalty percentage burned at a steady 2%. His trait coward joined now by something darker, humiliated. Tears streamed down his perfect cheekbones. I, Cedric Vane, attempted murder against Lord Branholt. His voice broke. I beg his mercy. I acknowledge my life as forfeit, held in debt by House Holt until such time as enough. I stepped forward, playing the gracious victor. Rise, Lord Cedric. Your debt is recorded. We need not be enemies. He rose. Our eyes met. His loyalty percentage didn't change. But beneath humiliated, a new trait was forming, letter by letter, burning like embers. Vendetta marked. I turned to watch Baron Aldous sign the peace accord. His hand trembled with fury as the quill scratched across parchment. Every noble in attendance saw his humiliation, watched his son broken, witnessed his house brought low by a second son with no inheritance and no prospects. As the final signature dried, a new notification blazed across my vision. Blueprint fragment unlocked. Reinforced crossbow mechanism. Complete design available. I understood. Then what the system was teaching me. The knife in my back could have killed me. Violence almost ended my story before it began. But mercy, calculated, public, humiliating mercy, had given me trade routes, political leverage, a blood debt, and now a weapon schematic that could change how wars were fought. Mercy was the more dangerous weapon. and I was just getting started. The castle courtyard smelled of sweat and ambition. 12 candidates stood in formation. While my father surveyed them from the elevated platform, his ceremonial sword resting across his knees. I watched from the shadows of the colonnade, using assess on each hopeful in turn. Marcus Thorn, loyalty, 34%, core trait, ambitious, hidden skill. Nun Willem of Greythorn, loyalty, 28%, core trait, self-serving, hidden skill, poison recognition 1 by 1. The panels revealed the same story. Sons of minor knights, hedge lords, merchant families seeking elevation. Every single one of them was here to climb, not to serve. The first trial begins, my father announced. Single combat. Standard rules. Steel rang against steel. As the first pair squared off, I'd seen enough practice duels to know what I was watching. Competent blade work, nothing exceptional. The taller candidate won with a textbook disarm. I stepped forward. Father, I request permission to conduct an additional assessment. Lord Holt's eyebrows rose. The gathered knights exchanged glances. Second sons didn't make requests at formal ceremonies. Explain yourself, Bran. Combat skill can be trained. Character cannot. I kept my voice steady, projecting confidence I didn't entirely feel. I proposed a scenario test to evaluate judgment under pressure. My father studied me for a long moment. Something flickered in his expression. Curiosity, perhaps, or the faintest hint of respect. Granted. Proceed. I descended to the courtyard floor. 12 pairs of eyes tracked my movement, most of them dismissive. The second son who preferred books to swords. The one who'd been stabbed by another noble's brat and somehow walked away with trade concessions instead of blood vengeance. Here is your scenario, I said. You command a garrison of 30 men. Your lord has ordered you to hold a mountain pass against a force of 200. A messenger arrives offering you 500 gold marks to abandon your position before dawn. Your lord will never know. Your men will survive. The gold could change your family's fortunes forever. I paused, letting the weight of the choice settle over them. What do you do? Marcus Thorn answered first. Take the gold. A dead commander serves no one. His assess panel pulsed. Loyalty decreased to 31%. The pass is lost regardless, added Willem of Greythorn. Better to preserve strength for a winnable battle. Loyalty, 24% 1 by 1, they answered. 8 chose the gold with various justifications. 2 chose to fight, but admitted they'd send their families the money first. One asked if he could negotiate for more. Then I reached the 12th candidate. The blacksmith's daughter stood at the end of the line, shoulders squared beneath an ill-fitting jerkin. She'd bound her chest and cropped her hair. But I'd known the moment I saw her. Mira Ashford had been making practice swords for the castle since she was 12. Her disguise fooled the knights who'd never bothered to learn a commoner's face. Your answer? I hold the pass. No josetaschen. Why? The gold would transform your family's circumstances. Your father's forge barely turned a profit. Her jaw tightened. My father taught me that a thing is only worth what it costs to make. Honor costs everything. Gold costs nothing. But the taking, the assess panel blazed bright. Mira Ashford, loyalty, 94%, core trait, steadfast, hidden trait, innovative. I felt the system pulse with recognition. This was the one. You're not Marcus Ashford's son, I said quietly. You're his daughter. The courtyard went silent. Myra's hand dropped to her belt knife. I didn't ask about your parentage. I continued, raising my voice so everyone could hear. I asked about your character. You answered correctly. I turned to face my father's platform. I made my selection. Mira Ashford will serve. As my first squire, the protests erupted immediately. A commoner? A woman? Lord Holt, surely you won't permit. This is a mockery of tradition. My father raised one hand. Silence fell. Bran. His voice carried the weight of 20 years commanding men. Explain your reasoning. 11 candidates chose gold or survival over duty. One chose honor despite having the most to gain from betrayal. I met his gaze steadily. I need squires who will hold when the cost is everything. Mira Ashford is the only candidate who passed that test. Loreholt studied his second son for a long moment. I couldn't read his expression, disappointment, certainly, but something else beneath it. The selection is yours to make, he said finally. The consequences are yours to bear. It wasn't approval. It wasn't support. But it wasn't rejection either. I descended the platform steps to where Mira stood alone, the other candidates having edged away from her like she carried plague. My lord. She dropped to one knee, her voice rough. I didn't expect, stand up. I extended my hand. Squires don't kneel to me. They work beside me. Her calloused fingers gripped my wrist. Strong hands. Builder's hands. She pulled herself up and leaned close, her whisper meant for my ears alone. I'll build whatever you need me to build, my lord. The wagon crested the final hill, and I saw my exile. Thornwall was supposed to be a fortress. What I found was a rotting wooden fence surrounding 40 men who looked like they'd already accepted death. The palisade leaned inward at 3 points, gaps wide enough for a determined wolf to squeeze through. I jumped from the wagon before it stopped rolling. My boots hit mud that sucked at my heels. The drainage here was a disaster. Mira landed beside me, her eyes scanning the walls with the same horror I felt. My lord Branholt, a grizzled man, limped toward us, his left ear a mangled stump, his voice flat as a funeral drum. I'm Sergeant Garrick Stone. Welcome to the place where second sons come to die. Assess. The blue panel flickered into existence. Garrick Stone, loyalty, 67%. Core trait, prove it. Hidden skill, tactical retreat specialist. Note, has survived 11 commanders. None lasted more than 2 seasons. 11 commanders. I wasn't planning to be the 12th corpse. Show me the walls, I said. Garrick's eyebrow rose, probably expecting me to demand quarters first or complain about the mud. This way. I pressed my palm against the first palisade post. Analyze. Material, pine, 7 years weathered. Structural integrity, 34%. Load-bearing capacity, compromised by internal rot. Stress point, base junction, failure likely under moderate lateral force. The next post. Analyze. Same rot, worse angle. The one after showed termite damage, so severe I was surprised it hadn't collapsed already. These walls won't hold against a determined goat, I said. They held last harvest season. Garrick's tone carried challenge. How many men did you lose? Silence. Then, 14. I kept walking, kept touching posts, kept analyzing. Mira shadowed me with a leather journal she'd produced from somewhere, scratching notes. As I called out percentages and weaknesses, the soldiers watched from their positions, hollow-eyed men who'd stopped believing help would ever come. At the northeast corner, I crouched and grabbed a handful of soil. Analyze. Material, clay-heavy loam, high mineral content. Properties, excellent compression strength when dried, suitable for rammed earth construction. Water table, 8 feet, accessible via shallow well. I stood and scanned the tree line beyond the walls. The ashwood loomed dark and tangled, but between us and those monster-haunted depths stood a grove of young oak. Analyze. Material, oak, 3-year growth. Structural integrity, 92%. Properties, high tensile strength, suitable for load-bearing applications, excellent for mechanical components requiring flexibility under stress. Something clicked in my mind. The rotting posts, the clay soil, the young oak, the problem I needed to solve. Blueprint. The blue schematic unfolded like a flower blooming, lines of light tracing themselves across my vision. I saw it complete. Reinforced palisade joints using iron brackets and oak crossbeams, the load distributed across clay-packed foundations that would harden like stone. But that wasn't all. The blueprint kept building. A counterweight gate mechanism that 3 men could operate instead of 10. And something else, something that made my breath catch. Mira, my voice came out strange. I need your father's tools. I brought them. She patted the heavy pack on her back. What did you see? I grabbed her journal and began sketching. The lines flowed from my hand like water finding its course. I understood now how the mechanism worked, the tension principles, the release mechanism. The system wasn't just showing me designs. It was teaching me. What is that? Mira leaned over my shoulder, her breath warm against my ear. A repeating crossbow. I finished the final line. 3 bolts before reloading. The tension wins here, the bolt feed sits here, and this lever resets the string in half the time of a standard crank. Her calloused fingers traced the schematic. I watched her eyes, the way they widened, then narrowed, then widened again, as she worked through the mechanics. This is impossible. Her voice cracked. No one's ever. Can you build it? She looked at me like I'd asked if she could breathe. Give me iron stock in 2 days. Garrick had approached silently, that soldier's habit of appearing where you didn't expect him. He studied the sketch with the skepticism of a man who'd been promised miracles before. Pretty drawing, he said. Won't matter if the walls fall. The walls won't fall. I pulled the journal back and flipped to a fresh page. I'm rebuilding the foundations with rammed earth. The posts get oak crossbeams and iron brackets at every junction. The northeast corner gets torn down entirely and rebuilt at the correct angle. With what labor? These men can barely stand watch rotations. Then we'll work shifts. 3 hours building, 3 hours resting, 3 hours patrol. I met his eyes. I'm not here to die quietly, Sergeant. I'm here to make this place into something monsters learn to fear. Something shifted in his expression. Not belief, not yet, but the death of certainty that I would fail. Assess. Garrick Stone, loyalty, 71%. 4%. I'd bought 4% with words and sketches. I'd earned the rest with results. I picked up a hammer from the supply pile and walked to where a crossbow frame sat half-assembled from previous failed attempts. Mira joined me with her tool roll, already calculating measurements for my schematic. The first nail bit into wood, then the second. Mira began filing a trigger mechanism. While I fitted the stock, the gate burst open. A young man in Scout's leather stumbled through, his horse foaming, his face the color of curdled milk. Sergeant. He felt his knees in the mud. Monster Scouts, I counted 12, moving through the eastern ashwood. Garrick's face went gray. That's impossible. Harvest season is 3 months away. I saw them. The Scout's voice broke. They're early, and they're not Scouts, sir. They're advance parties. Something's driving them out of the deep woods. Myra's file stopped moving. Every soldier in earshot had gone still. I looked at my half-finished crossbow prototype, then at the rotting walls, then at the tree lean where something was coming that hadn't come this early in 30 years. We weren't ready. We had weeks of work ahead and maybe days to complete it. I drove another nail into the frame. Then we build faster. The hammer fell. The nail sank. I didn't sleep that night. Blueprint flickered in my vision as I sketched furiously by candlelight. The gear-driven winch materialized piece by piece. Counterweights, pulley ratios, chain links that could slam our main gate shut in 3 seconds instead of 30. My hand cramped. I kept drawing. You're going to burn out before they even arrive. Mira stood in my doorway, soot streaking her face, her leather apron still smoking from the forge. Sleep when we're dead. I held up the schematic. Can you build this? She crossed the room in 4 strides, snatched the parchment, and studied it for exactly 6 seconds. The tension ratio's wrong. You'll snap the chain on the 3rd use. She grabbed my charcoal and corrected 3 measurements. There. Now it'll hold. The system pulse blue. Innovative trait recognized. Design efficiency plus 15%. I grinned. How fast? Dawn. Maybe earlier if your soldiers stop gawking and start hauling iron. She was gone before I could thank her. I followed her to the forge and found Garrick already there, running 20 soldiers through crossbow drills by torchlight. The repeating mechanisms clicked and sang as bolts punched through straw targets 50 yards away. 6 shots in 10 seconds. The old sergeant's face showed something I hadn't seen before. Belief. Again, he barked. Faster. Those things don't wait for you to reload. I pulled up Assess and swept my gaze across the formation. Most soldiers hovered between 60 and 75% loyalty. Decent, not exceptional. But 3 names blaze brighter. Corporal Wren Marsh, loyalty 84%, hidden trait, tactical intuition. Private, Joss Keller. Loyalty 81%, hidden trait, fearless. Private della Ironwood, loyalty 87%, hidden trait, sharpshooter. I walked to Garrick and spoke quietly. Those three, Marsh, Keller, Ironwood, make them squad leaders by morning. He squinted at me. Keller's been here 2 months. Marsh talks too much. Ironwood's a woman. Marsh talks because she's always thinking 3 steps ahead. Keller doesn't flinch. Ironwood hit center mass 6 times in a row just now. I met his stare. Trust me, Garrick held my gaze for a long moment. His loyalty number ticked up 71%. Fine. But when Marsh's mouth gets her squad killed, that's on you. I'll carry it. He grunted and turned back to the drills. Progress. The caltrops came next. Blueprint had given me a forge pattern for 4-pointed iron spikes. Simple, brutal, and easy to mass produce. While Myra's apprentices poured molten metal into clay molds. I counted our grain stores in the cellar. 40 days of supplies. Maybe 50 if we rationed. Boots on the stairs. I turned to find a stranger, a wiry man in a travel-stained cloak, a merchant's badge pinned to his collar. Lore Holt. He was already nervous. I bring news from the eastern trade routes. Assess activated automatically. Loyalty, 52%. Traits, opportunistic observant. He'd sell information to whoever paid most. Useful, as long as I paid first. Speak. Baron Aldous Vane has been buying grain futures aggressively. The merchant licked his lips. Wheat, barley, dried meat, every surplus in the region. Word is he's preparing to embargo Thornwall entirely. My father's old enemy. Cedric's father. The man whose son I'd humiliated instead of killed. He's going to starve us out. I said it calmly. Let the monsters do the dirty work. Then sweep and acclaim the pass when we're all corpses. The merchant shrugged. I only report what I hear, my lord. What you do with it, how much for exclusive trade rights through Thornwall. After we survive this. His eyes went wide. You're confident. I'm prepared. Name your price. We haggled for 4 minutes. He left with a signed contract and a smile. I left with a promise of iron shipments that would bypass Vane's network entirely. Mira found me at dawn, standing over a wooden table covered in blueprint fragments. The winch system was already installed. I could hear chains testing in the distance. But I was staring at something new. What is that? She leaned over my shoulder. I traced the schematic with one finger. A windmill. Not the clumsy grain grinders nobles use for show. This was a precision instrument. Angle blades to catch crosswinds. Gear reduction for consistent rotation. A millstone system that could process wheat faster than 10 men working shifts. Freedom, I said. Vane controls our food supply because we depend on his mills. But if Thornwall can grind its own grain, he can't starve what he can't control. Myra's eyes blazed. This is brilliant. This is survival. I rolled up the schematic. Can you build it? Give me a week. You have 4 days. She grabbed the plans and ran. Standing on Thornwall's reinforced walls an hour later, I watched my soldiers train with weapons that shouldn't exist for another century. The crossbows sang. The caltrops glittered in fresh-laid fields. The gate winch gleamed with oiled chains. My system pulsed blue, brighter than before. Army trait unlocked. Engineering core, prototype. I stared at the words. Army trait. Not personal. Not individual. The system was evolving, recognizing that my power came from what we built together. Below, monster howls echoed from the ashwood. Closer than yesterday. Hungrier. I gripped the battlements and grinned. Let them come. Then the system flickered again. A second message appeared, blood red instead of blue, pulsing with urgency I'd never seen before. Warning. Apex predator detected. Classification. Unknown. Threat level. Catastrophic. Current defenses insufficient. And beneath it, coordinates. Not toward the ashwood where the howls originated. Toward the south. Toward the Capitol Road. Toward the direction Baron Aldous Vane's men would be coming from. Something far worse than monsters was heading for Thornwall, and it was coming from behind us.